We are doing Extra Life again this year, where you can mash buttons, roll dice, play games, and help kids along the way. I hope you'll be a part of that with us. Stick around after the video for more information. Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions, here to give you my thoughts after playing about the first 5 hours of Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning. Now, I played this game all the way through the main campaign on the Xbox 360, really enjoyed my time with it. I'll talk some about the game itself, aside from the remaster, but then I also want to talk a bit about the changes that have been made and the improvements that they were shooting for, and how that kind of turned out. First off, this game, there's a lot of different opinions about this game. It depends on what you come to action RPGs for. If you're looking for a Skyrim type of experience, you might be disappointed, because this one does not have the depth of systems and interactivity with the world that a game like Skyrim does. Although it does have some people behind the scenes in common with the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, and I think that you can see that in some of the dialogue systems and the world interactions in this game. Now, before I go any further, I want to say a big thank you to THQ Nordic for supplying me with a review code for this game. Thank you very much, guys. This is a game that is known primarily for its combat. It's a third-person action RPG, and the combat is just really nicely mapped on the controls, all the different abilities that you can have no matter what class you're playing, a stealthy class, a mage class, or a fighter class, or any kind of crazy blend of the three, which you can totally do in this game. The controls are wonderfully mapped so that you can easily access a variety of abilities that each of those classes and upgrade paths can give to you. All the combat is very stylized and flashy, which definitely has some advantages to it. However, if your idea of a mage is a decrepit old guy walking around and not really physically able, it's not going to feel right playing a wizard in this game, because you're still doing dodge rolls and you're able to sprint around, and the characters you have to choose from, the models you have to choose from, are always kind of buff and pretty healthy looking. But that said, this is one of the few games that I feel like I can really play the mage I want to play as, in terms of their capabilities, in terms of the a wide variety of spells, and that it's interesting to play as a mage, and you're not penalized for playing as a mage. There are a number of open-world games, and this one isn't technically an open-world game, but it definitely feels that way in many respects. There are a number of open-world games that are fantasy, but they will not necessarily, like, say, The Witcher 2, The Witcher 3, doesn't allow you to play really as a dedicated mage. Skyrim and Oblivion do, and maybe Two Worlds 1 and 2, I would say also, but it's not a long list of these types of games. So this is possibly I don't want to say my go-to experience, but it's certainly one of my top games I've ever played that allows me to play as a solo magic user. Moving on from combat now, I want to mention that the looting in this game is really satisfying to me. Whenever you pick up loot, you can easily compare it to what you're currently equipping, and you can assign it to your junk category, item by item, and I just find it really satisfying, not just in terms of like the organization and how you can quickly look at what you have in front of you and organize it the way you want it, and then move on with the exploring and combat and stuff, but in terms of just the sound effects, and many games get this right, so it's not that unique, but I really enjoy all the sound effects associated with just picking up items. It's a simple thing, but I really appreciate it. There are also systems like crafting, blacksmithing, alchemy, that really reward you for exploring the environment and picking up ingredients and components for all those kinds of things. And so exploration, I feel like, is really rewarded in this game as well. It is worth looking around that corner. It's worth swimming in that river, swimming in that lake, because you're likely to run into a dive point of some kind. And there are abilities you can get that will allow you to more easily detect hidden doors, hidden treasure caches and stuff. And so the game is built to encourage you to explore and built to reward you for exploring. What it's not especially built for, I don't think, is choice. There are some serviceable options in dialogue when you're interacting with NPCs and deciding are you going to ask more information about the story they're telling you and the quest that they might give you, or are you going to just turn them down? Those are kind of the two main choices. But as far as like different dialogue reactions, most of the time, what you are prompted with is not like a sentence that your character is going to say, but a topic that you want them to talk about more. And then you will sometimes get general choices like I want to persuade them to try and get to give me something, and you'll have like one persuasion option. I think most of the time, I don't know if I've ever seen two, but anyway, one is pretty typical. Or you can just accept what they're asking or decline what they're asking. It's usually accepting a quest or declining a quest. And the choices that you make in the world are not going to be easily perceptible in terms of how they affect characters that you've interacted with. For example, I had one quest where there was a woman who wanted to be a part of this religious order that would not accept women in the leadership of that order, and so she asked me to go steal this scripture that she knew would prove that actually, according to their own scripture, women could be allowed to serve in leadership roles. And so I went and did that, and I talked to the characters that were part of that order. I was given the option to ask their opinion of this woman that was standing outside of their building, and they would give me an opinion about her. And then after I fulfilled the quest, gave them, gave her the book, and she was able to prove to them that she could be a part of the order. I followed her into the building, the temple or whatever it was, wondering if I was going to see kind of an Oblivion or Skyrim type interaction play out. Like I would see the moment where she shows the book to the religious leader there and say, see, according to your own scripture, and then he would have some kind of reaction. No, that scene was not available at all. I followed right on her heels into that building, and she was already just kind of part of the order, part of the group that was there, so there was no scene like that. The only way I could detect a difference in relationships between the NPCs was to go seek them out and talk to them and look and see if there was a new dialogue response that I would get from them on the topic of her name. Once you've talked to them about a topic, then the letters gray out, but if they're white, that means that you haven't talked to them about that yet, or they have new things to say about that topic. And so if you dig in, there is a lot of writing in there, and it's actually a bit interesting, but you have to really want that. You're not going to just naturally have people making a lot of interesting comments to you, and as long as once you've paid off your debts, if you commit a crime or something and the guards come after you, much like in Oblivion, you can choose to resist arrest, go to jail, or pay your fine. Well, once you've done what you're supposed to do, and paying off your fine, let's say, then the people that you had maybe committed crimes against are just totally fine with you. So, and that might have been a similar kind of thing going on in Oblivion, but I think that it's just definitely skin deep in terms of the systems and the reactions of the world and the people in the world to your character and your character's choices. It's not entirely skin deep, but if you want to see what the game has to offer in terms of changes to the world and characters as a result of your actions, you kind of have to go digging for it in dialogue. Also, it's worth noting that if you decide you want to kill somebody, there's a lot of NPCs, unfortunately, that are unkillable. They'll just kind of revive after a while, which is disappointing to me. I like the ability to, if I don't want to complete a quest, or if I don't like this guy, to express that by killing that character and kind of seeing that as my own solution to whatever the quest is. And then they can say quest failed or whatever. But in this game so far, it's been a while since I played the original on Xbox 360, and so far, about 5 hours in, what I'm seeing is rather than allowing you to do that and then allowing for that in the quest branches, they just make that character unkillable. On top of that, if you don't pay your fine and you're in trouble with the guards and you decide, I'm going to resist arrest, there is an infinite supply of guards. When you kill the ones that have already been assigned to that town, they will start spawning in endlessly from outside of the town. And so really your only option is to pay your fine, or I suppose go to jail, but I would think that, I'm not sure, I haven't tested out seeing if you can actually serve a complete sentence and what effect that might have on your character yet. So, persuasion mechanics, character interactions, the effect that you have on characters, they are there, but they're very limited compared to certainly Skyrim and I think even Oblivion. Now that said, I think if you can accept those things and kind of view it as a trade-off for what you get in the combat, that's not a disagreeable trade-off to me at all. I really, really enjoy the combat and the looting. The combat certainly more than Skyrim, maybe the looting more than Skyrim as well, and so I find those other elements really satisfying, and so I just kind of see any potential lore and world-building stuff and character interaction stuff that I want to dig into as extra. There are three main kind of ability trees. There's Might, Sorcery, and Finesse. Might is your fighter, Finesse is your roguish type person, and Sorcery is your magic type person, of course. All those abilities that you're going to unlock in those trees, though, are pretty centered on combat. You're not really going to see abilities that are dealing with character interaction a whole lot in those menus. However, if you go to your skills, then you see a bunch of options for skills that you could have, like alchemy and crafting and all the stuff that I mentioned before. And that's where you do have maybe a little bit more effect on the world in the non-combat sense. I mean, for example, as a magic user, if you fill out that tree, that's not going to give you the power to be more persuasive. That you're going to want to invest in alchemy for. So some of those more pragmatic, outside of combat functions, you're going to want to, if you want to be a magic user or think of yourself as a magic user, you're going to want to invest in alchemy. In fact, I think alchemy is the most interesting of all of them. Most of the others, you're just going to get statically better at whatever it is that you're doing, if it's a persuasion or whatever the skill might be. But alchemy gives you a great motivation to pick up as many of those plants and ingredients out in the wild as you can, and you can get potions that will increase your crafting abilities, that will increase your persuasiveness, that will make you invisible and more stealthy and stuff like that. On top of those modifications to your character and your main abilities and your skills, you can also choose a destiny for your character. You have a lot of different choices, and each of them correspond to a potential blend that you might have, pumping points into one of those three main class trees. And when you choose one that fits your playstyle and how you're building your character, then you get bonuses for that of some kind, usually in a combination of the trees that you're pumping skills into. As far as visual customization, though, at the start of the game, you are pretty limited. You have some okay hair options and okay face options. You can't really adjust your body type to make yourself more frail and thin or obese, or everybody pretty much looks like an awesome action figure. And a particular kind of awesome action figure, more usually of the bulky variety, unless you're playing as a race that is a little bit more thin. But you do have the opportunity later in the game to at least change, I don't think you can change your gender, but you can change your other cosmetic elements of your appearance once you have found like a house with a mirror in it, and then you can use that to change your appearance. You can also wonderfully respec your whole character. There are merchants called Fate Weavers in the world, and you can interact with them, pay them a certain fee, and completely respec your character if halfway through you want to try something completely different or something that's just slightly modified from what you've been doing. And so the game really seems to want to encourage you to play around and try the different options that you have to build your character. I think that there are definitely some interesting themes, as I always like to look for, religious, spiritual, philosophical themes going on in the narrative. And I think if you pay attention, if you are looking to engage in dialogue and story, then there's some interesting things to be found in terms of how religion is handled. You might have picked that up based on the side quest that I described earlier. And there are other situations like that seem to be tapping into some common thoughts that occur to people as they're thinking about religious institutions or religion itself or the worship of a god and things like that. And so there's definitely some stuff there. I might even put a video up that focuses on that a little bit more in the not too distant future if I have the time, so don't hold me to that. But I think at the same time, if you don't want to engage with the story, there are quest markers that will just let you ignore all dialogue except for you can just fire through it really fast. Don't care what they're saying. Just give me the quest marker, go. And then you get a quest marker, and then you go. And if you really need any more details, then you can look in your quest notes. But it's usually pretty simple, mostly involving combat, getting something, bringing it back, or maybe stealing something. It's not a lot of really complex manipulation of the world in the quests in the game. So anyway, those themes are there, definitely, but you have to be wanting to engage with the story, which you may find that you are not, as was the case for me for much of my first playthrough on the Xbox 360. Although this time around, I've said to myself, well, let's see what's going on. Let's turn on the voice acting, which, by the way, is really pretty solid, more so than I remembered, and interesting. The facial animations, they look pretty static and wooden, so you're not going to be in the game for that, I don't think. But there is some story there. It's performed pretty well by the voice actors, I think, and but if you want to engage with it, it's there. So let's talk, since I already touched a little bit on the visuals, let's talk about the changes, the upgrades, and let's start with the visuals. Now, first off, I should say, I'm not like a graphics connoisseur. That's never been something that's especially drawn me to a game. As long as the visual design is interesting, the fidelity, the articulation, the minuscule textures aren't really a selling point for me. I play most of my games on just a 23.5-inch 1080p screen here in my office. However, I did notice that the textures were more detailed, especially when I got out the Xbox 360 version and I happened to have the ability to look at both at the same time at two different screens. And there's definitely more detail in the textures, so that's appreciated. I don't know that you're going to notice that if you're on PC, but going from the Xbox 360 to the PS4 version, I definitely noticed a difference. Also, difference in contrast in the colors. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about this because you know that there are videos out there that you can watch that'll give you actual visual comparisons of the two. But I will say that the design of the game, the visual design, has always kind of had not a cel-shaded look to it, but a bit of a comic booky, cartoony look where the textures have not been the big selling point. It's mostly been about the colors and the shapes of the armor and things like that. But I will say that the textures that they improved upon did bring, for me at least, a welcome little bit of groundedness to the world, made it just a little less cartoony, which is something that I appreciate. I tend to like fantasy worlds that are more serious and grounded looking, even if conceptually they're really wild and fantastical. I was hoping that, much like Skyrim Special Edition on PS4, we would see a significant improvement or great reduction in load times, and that I've not found to be the case. Unfortunately, I've been counting load screens going in and out of buildings at around 30 seconds or more, so I am pretty disappointed in that. I've also seen a few glitches here and there in how the camera behaves. I did see just one instance of a character whose head went freaky and started spinning around Exorcist style and going upside down and stuff, but that was, I think, an isolated incident, but it was pretty weird. But actually, even though the camera was having some glitches every now and then, not frequently, I will take that as a trade-off, even if they never patch it, which hopefully they will. I assume they would like to do that. But I take it as a trade-off. Given the new control that you have over the camera, you can actually zoom out the camera, control how high or low it is behind your character. If you want, you can actually go out far enough so that it almost looks like you're playing a Diablo-style game with a very small character. And if maybe you don't like the visuals, they look a little bit too overdone, you might prefer the look of the game when you're zoomed out and everything is smaller, and then those exaggerated design choices won't be as big of a deal. They'll actually seem much more fitting. The music is very appropriate to the setting. It has this kind of mystical sense of awe and this fairy tale type of vibe to it. And then also kind of like a tribal drum style when it comes to combat. I've played the original game enough that at this point I'm like, I might turn this music off before too long. It's getting, a little bit old. But I think for those maybe coming to the game for the first time, it definitely sells a particular feeling that you might enjoy or at least find unique. And like many other RPGs and video games that I really like, it gives me those crunchy boots. Along with the Foley sounds I mentioned from looting, you have those nice crunchy boots when you're running around, and that's a simple thing, but I really like that a lot. I also want to mention that with the review code, THQ Nordic helpfully provided a list of changes made to the game, kind of the main primary changes. Now, they didn't list all of them here. There was no mention of the camera on this, or the HUD, which you can actually make smaller now or get rid of altogether, which I think is kind of a neat feature for those that would be interested in that. But what they did focus on in this document is they've added a very hard difficulty level, and then they've focused a good amount on how the game responds to your leveling up. There is auto-scaling, but previously a zone that you entered into for the first time would read your character's level, and then it would build its difficulty according to that the first time you entered, and it would stay that way the rest of your time playing on that game, that playthrough. But now they've updated it so that every time your character enters a zone, it will recheck and it will make adjustments accordingly. Now, that doesn't mean that it's always going to be the same difficulty in every zone or the same difficulty all the time. They still have factored in the interest players have in coming to an area, realizing it's too hard for them right now, and then going and leveling up somewhere else and coming back and having that power fantasy of like laying waste to the guys that used to really threaten you. That is part of their redesign of the leveling system. They've done something similar with the loot, so that when you enter an area and you open up a chest for the first time, that chest is going to have loot according to your level. And then also they've put in some new things to make it so that you are more likely to find loot that is useful to you and the character path that you are on as you're building your character. And anytime you open a chest that doesn't have loot that's very exciting, they're able to detect that it's not a great fit for you, and they increase the likelihood that on the next chest you'll find something that really is rewarding. Now, I already liked the loot system the first time I played through the game, but what I will say is in the late game, when I got really powerful after I'd finished the main campaign, I didn't have a lot of motivation to explore the world, even areas that I'd been to most of the areas at that point. I just hadn't completed quests in all of them, and so I was just laying waste to everybody. I didn't feel really motivated to find new loot and to create new items and stuff. I just was losing some motivation. I was just too powerful, and so I think this is likely going to help preserve that feeling of progression, that motivation to keep progressing late in the game. And so I can't confirm that that's the case, but I'm looking forward to finding out, and I'm hopeful that it is. So let's talk about the price and what you're getting for your money here. This is $40 on the PlayStation Store. I'd imagine it's the same price on Xbox One. You can get on Amazon the Xbox 360 version used for less than $10, and that includes shipping and everything. You can pretty easily find a copy for less than $10. What I don't think we'll find is any of the DLC. Now, I used to check every now and then to see if the DLC for this game was on sale, and I don't think I ever saw it once go on sale on the Xbox Live Marketplace, and I believe each of the DLCs, which run less than 10 hours in length, was about $15 or like $10 at the least. And so, if for some reason they came back, they would probably be priced the same way, and you'd be looking at spending $10 for the game on Amazon, and then an additional $20 to $30 to get the DLC packs. But this version of the game, in addition to its upgrades, includes all the released DLC for the game. And so I think that alone is worth noting. Granted, I only ever bought, I think, one of the DLC packs and found just tons of enjoyment. I still didn't complete all the things that I could possibly complete in that world in my playthrough. It's not as long as like a Skyrim experience. I've spent, in a single playthrough, I could put 100 hours into Skyrim, and in a single playthrough on this game, it was less than 60. So that's something to keep in mind as well. You can look at how long to beat to kind of see what the averages are. And as far as those upgrades go, would I say it's worth it to come to this game? Just if you just were totally going to be content with the $10 Xbox 360 version, we're never going to want any of the DLC. And you've never played the game before, then I think that's at least worth considering. But I think if you're coming back to the game again, and that's presumably because you already like it and you're already kind of interested in coming back to it at some point, then I think that it's totally worth it to get it for $40. And certainly if it goes on sale even just a little bit. So I guess in summary, if you've never played this game before, I would say educate yourself, watch a number of reviews to figure out if you're the type of gamer that's going to enjoy what this game has to offer. As for me, I have really been enjoying my time with it. You know, sometimes I'll play a game for review during my work hours during the day, but I won't necessarily feel like continuing to play it at night when the workday is done, and I just kind of want to unwind and do what I want to do. But I found the case last night to be that when I finished working and I was able to do whatever I wanted, I was like, I want to play more of this. I am having a lot of fun with this. Also, if this makes any difference to you, I accidentally pulled the trigger on purchasing this game an hour and a half before I got a review code from the folks at THQ Nordic. And so I've spent $40 on this game, and I feel really good about that decision. And my budget is not like super tight, but I got to be thoughtful about every purchase I make from here until Christmas. And I calculate and think ahead. And so that was a very calculated decision, and it's one that I do not regret. Even having played through the campaign once already, excited to get back into this. I'm excited to be back into it already. I'm enjoying the very subtle improvements, but it's really that core game that is still holding up for me. I'm also looking forward to getting into the DLC that I never played before that's included in this set. And then the DLC called Fatesworn is coming out in 2021. I mistakenly, I think, said in one of my previous videos covering UE3 2020 that it was going to be a pretty beefy expansion, you know, maybe like 10 plus hours, and from what I've read recently, it sounds like it's only going to be about 5 or so hours, so not a very significant expansion, which is disappointing for me to hear, but it's still, you know, something more to look forward to in this game world, if that is relevant to you. I think those are all my thoughts. I would love to get yours in the comments below, and then of course I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. It is time for Extra Life again, and I'd love for you to be a part of it with me. Here's a recycled but slightly modified promo to tell you more. Once again this year, Christian Geek Central is participating in Extra Life. This is a charity that raises funds for the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals, which provides free medical care to children whose families could otherwise not afford it. And this is very often for critical, life-saving treatment. Joining our team only requires a willingness to ask your family and friends to consider donating toward your fundraising efforts. Participants also usually do something fun and game-related to draw attention to their fundraising efforts, like a special game night at your home or your church, or like me, you could do a crazy 24-hour video gaming marathon. Now, I'm theming it around video games, but really this event can be themed around any kind of gaming, which includes both video games and tabletop games of any kind. What you do to raise funds is entirely up to you, but I would love for you to consider joining the Christian Geek Central Extra Life team. As team leader, I'll be there to help answer your questions, provide some helpful tips if I can, and just in general be your fundraising cheerleader and try to draw attention myself to your fundraising efforts. You can get more information about the event as a whole at extra-life.org, and if you choose to sign up there, be sure to select Christian Geek Central as your team so I can get in touch with you and then just help in whatever way I can. Fundraising can begin at any time, but our main push is going to be through the month of October leading up to November 7th. That's the annual Extra Life Game Day, when I'll be streaming my 24-hour video gaming marathon live and trying to stay awake without throwing up. More details on my live stream as we get closer to it. That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.